Mr. Christopher Collins, Director of Research at the Margaret Thatcher Foundation, will now address convocation.
Thank you very much. I shall speak very briefly. I am very pleased and honoured to be here. Congratulations are due, first and last, on an occasion like this. Firstly, to you all as individuals. You worked immensely hard, and hard work has earned its reward, as it should. So many, many congratulations. A great day for you. Congratulations, too, to ESE itself, because you fought hard to get to this day as well. And looking around, I can see how flourishing this institution is. And only a few years back, you must have wondered whether you would get this far. So it's a vindication for you, a vindication of principles of freedom and independence in education. And that's, I suppose, the best reason for having me here, because the person I work for, Margaret Thatcher, has long been associated with this cause. In relation to education, of course, because the validating institution for ESE was set up partly with her help, and for 40 years or more she had some very bruising fights, just as ESE has had. And of course, too, for her, these principles, freedom and independence, were of much wider application. You don't just find that they matter in education. They were the basis, really, of the whole of her politics, a necessity, a part of our way of life. And were she here rather than me, and I'm sure you all wish she was, she would end by saying, she'd peer over her glasses and raise her finger and say, you must always fight for these things. Even when it seems dark, when you don't think you're going to win through, never surrender in that fight. It is always worth it. Thank you.
First, I want to agree with the previous speaker. I must congratulate the new graduates of the university and of the European School of Economics. But I want to add one thing to what the rector said. The rector said quite correctly that a degree from the European School of Economics is a degree that speaks of entrepreneurialism, not wanting to waste time. He obviously would not like the word magnania to be expressed in his earshot, about creativity and drive and ambition. But I would like to add one word to his pantheon of the qualities required of leadership, because he is quite right. It's surprising how few people across the world, even today, have degrees. By getting university degrees, you have entered into a privileged minority, a minority that is expected to provide leadership. It is a very rewarded minority. The possession of a university degree increases your salary by 10, 20, 50, perhaps even 80%, year in, year out, for the rest of your lives. You have joined a privileged and well-paid minority. But I would ask you to consider one duty that comes with this privilege. Privilege, of course, which you may have paid for, or which your parents or relatives may have paid for. And it is the duty to be honest and to have integrity and to avoid, in both small and big ways, corruption. It is a tragic truth that the rich countries of the world are the honest countries where when you go to the doctor or the lawyer or the solicitor or the policeman or policewoman, you know that that person, like the businessman, like the taxman, like the corn shop man, will do his or her duty honestly. And if you're fortunate to live in such a society, you will live in a rich society. If you live in a society where the politician or the bureaucrat or even the small little person, and some of us are only small little people operating a corner shop, if those people are not honest, you will live in a poor country. And so I hope that you will take, with the privileges that come, the very considerable privileges that come with a degree from the European School of Economics and the University of Buckingham, I do hope that you will take into your lives the sense of duty to integrity and honesty. And at every stage of one's life, even if it's just selling a railway ticket in a small provincial railway station, if that is a transaction that is performed honestly, then we are all playing a part in making a country rich. And if it's a transaction we perform dishonestly, then we are contributing to poverty in the long run. So my first message is congratulations. You are now privileged, but with privilege does come duty. And my second message, and there are only two messages, so I'm halfway through, it is to the European School of Economics. This is a very brave organisation. It also speaks to the very origins of the European university. The Western world's first university was created in Bologna nearly 1,000 years ago. And the origins of this university in Bologna are interesting and important. It was created, the University of Bologna, by a small group of young men. In those days, it was a very sexist world, I'm afraid. It was just men in those days, who wished to become commercial lawyers. 1,000 years ago, Italy was, of course, already then the richest country in Europe. You had recovered, the Italians were the first to recover from the Dark Ages, and you had a flourishing commerce. You were the richest country in Europe. But the governments of the day were not interested in merchants, whom they despised. They were interested only in aristocrats and kings and soldiers. And so the courts of the kings worried about killing peasants and punishing evildoers, but they were not interested in the commercial law, which they saw with usury almost as a crime. And so the merchants of the day got together in Italy and created the world's first commercial courts, where merchants sat in judgment on other merchants, and the punishments, because these were not courts of the king, they couldn't kill, but what they could do is they could expel merchants from the guilds. And once a merchant was no longer part of a guild, he could no longer trade, and he was reduced to becoming a peasant again. So these were powerful courts, but people needed to be trained in the law, and there was no training. And so a group of merchants got together and employed advocates in Bologna who had simply learnt by experience, and asked them to teach them the beginnings of the commercial law. And then from Bologna, you have the medical school in Padua, you have Montpellier, and spreading out from Italy, you have across the whole of southern Europe, the Mediterranean, a whole series of universities, all of which were independent, all of which were successful. And a terrible thing happened to the universities of Europe. They were all taken over either by the Pope, who in those days was not a nice man, or by the kings or emperors, who were certainly not nice men. And scholarship in Europe died. We now think of the Enlightenment, the Reformation, the Agricultural Revolution, the Industrial Revolution. None of these owed anything to the universities of Europe because they were all dead. And the European university was revived largely in America, but also in Britain and Australia. Now, why is the European School of Economics so special? The European School of Economics was and is a determined effort by a group of brave people to recreate that original European spirit of 1,000 years ago, based in Italy, of a university that exists not for the government and not for the teachers, but for the students. The rector very kindly said that the University of Buckingham, which is Britain's only independent university, came top of the National Student Survey. It's true. The Times Higher Education Supplement showed that we beat Oxford. The Sunday Times showed that we beat Cambridge. There are 150 universities in Britain. Between them, they get £12 billion a year, 20 billion euros or whatever the exchange is, in subsidies from the government. And the one university in Britain that comes top in the government's own survey of student satisfaction is the one university that gets no government subsidies, Buckingham. And it is the same with the European School of Economics. It is obvious that the state of Italian universities is not good, and there is this beacon, the European School of Economics, determined to go right back to the traditions of Bologna before they were crushed, of putting the student first, second and third. And we are very proud at Buckingham to have been associated with the European School of Economics, that we see as a beacon of freedom in a hostile and dangerous world. And I have no doubt that in 50 years' time, when people look back on this era, they will see Buckingham, and by the way, the British government is now copying Buckingham in every respect. We've always had fees at Buckingham, now the state universities in Britain have fees, and so it goes on. I have no doubt that in 50 years' time, the Italian state universities will look much more like the European School of Economics in Buckingham, because, of course, the model is Harvard, Yale, Stanford and Princeton. And what do Harvard, Yale, Stanford and Princeton have in common? They are all independent universities. The best universities in the world are independent, and Buckingham and the European School of Economics are determined, in alliance, to recreate in old Europe what the new world in America and Australia have shown so often, that the only decent education worth having is an independent education. And this would not have happened but for the courage of your rector and the skills of your managing director, Lara Mogavero. And so I welcome them. And I congratulate them. And this beautiful building, I'm sure, is just the beginning of a long and prosperous future for us all. So, Rector, graduates, parents and relatives, thank you for a wonderful ceremony, and I hope this is the beginning of a long-term relationship, not only between our two institutions, but also between you as individuals, friendly with each other, I hope, for the next 50 years, building a community based on trust and integrity and service. Thank you very much.